Good afternoon, everybody. Today we are going to discuss about benign bone tumors. Benign bone tumors is a very important topic with respect to your university exams as well as entrance exams. And if you are interested in many orthopedic quizzes also, there will be emphasis on bone tumors, X-rays of bone tumors. So before going into the lesson, first we'll throw some light on examination of the when you get a case of bone tumor, how you have to proceed with examination and different investigations done, and then uh, some principles of treatment. Mostly now I'm going to deal with benign bone tumors, so more emphasis will be laid on treatment management of benign bone tumors only, and then we'll see different benign bone tumors in this class. So first, what are bone tumors? Bone tumor is nothing but neoplasia or uncontrolled proliferation of different cells of bone. So in any bone, you have different types of cells like osteoblasts, osteoclasts, and chondrocytes, and there is even also the marrow component. All these different tissues, connective tissues, are components are present in the bone. So most of the bone tumors, any of these cells can differentiate and lead to a particular bone tumor, which we are going to see in our next slides. So what makes bone tumor special from other tumors? So presentation initially, uh, there may not be very pathognomonic features initially in case of benign bone tumors. Usually some trivial trauma or any pain in that region may make the patient to go to a doctor and get x-rays done, and usually on that most of the benign tumors are identified. And second thing is varied differential diagnosis. So radiological appearance of a particular tumor is similar to many other tumors. Like you see unicameral bone cyst, it has similar radiological appearance with that of aneurysmal bone cyst, fibrous dysplasia, etc. So I mean GCT also. So differential diagnosis is over wide range. So that makes bone tumors another special entity, especially benign. And most of the bone tumors, they are more prevalent in younger age group, in first 2 decades of life. And malignant tumors also, somehow they are bimodal in distribution. That is, some tumors which are predominantly more in early age group and some tumors in elderly age group. So that is why this bone tumors thing is special. So as I told earlier, depending on the type of cell involved and predominant matrix produced in the tumor, the bone tumors are classified. And each type of tissue contained within the bone may give rise to one, or in most cases several, clinically, radiologically and histologically distinct benign and malignant neoplasms, and each one has their own biological behavior. So now we are going to see about bone, tissue of origin. If the matrix is bony matrix, you have benign tumors, osteoid osteoma, osteoblastoma and osteoma, and the malignant counterform of these tumors is osteosarcoma. And if the cell of origin is cartilage, or the matrix produced is cartilaginous in origin, then you have benign tumors which produce this cartilage type of matrix. You have osteochondroma, chondroblastoma, enchondroma, and chondromyxoid fibroma. And the malignant counterform is chondrosarcoma. And other fibrous cortical defect and other things, they are fibrous tissue in origin. In this class, we are going to emphasize mainly on benign bone forming tumors and benign cartilage forming tumors, and some other tumors like giant cell tumor, aneurysmal bone cyst, unicameral bone cyst, and adamantinoma. So this slide, I will come again. So before that, how to evaluate bone tumors? So whenever you have a case of bone tumor, these are some important things which are essential in diagnosis. First thing is history and physical examination. that we are going to see next in detail. Then routine blood investigations, tumor profile or markers, plain X-ray. Plain X-ray is the essential tool for the diagnosis of bone tumors, which is followed by CT scan, MRI, bone scan, PET scan, biopsy, and followed by histopathological examination. So coming to the history, there is no much difference between examination of a swelling, which is already taught to you in surgery, and orthopedics. Few different points are there. So this history of examination of swelling applies to both these bone tumors as well as chronic osteomyelitis also. So first thing is age of the patient. As I told earlier, most of the bone tumors, they occur in first 2 decades of life. Solitary bone cyst is usually seen in children up to puberty. Even aneurysmal bone cyst is also seen in immature skeleton. Whereas osteoblastoma and osteoid osteoma are seen in second and third decades. Then primary malignant bone tumors are seen in 50 to 30 years of age, usually osteosarcoma, and in elderly age, wing sarcoma or other secondaries are seen in elderly age group. So coming to the onset and duration. Most of the benign bone tumors insidious onset and they progress gradually. Most of the times they are incidental findings. A patient usually complains of some trivial trauma and gets investigated. On that you will see some sort of bone tumor or abnormality. Most of the tumors, benign bone tumors, they are painless initially, and then they gradually there may be pain as the tumor increases in size. However, osteosarcoma, the pain is the first feature. And the pain also, it is in bone tumors except osteosarcoma, it is dull or boring type of pain. And after that, you will find the swellings and similar swellings. So in history, first you will go to the age of the patient, onset, pain, and any other swellings in the body, usually in diaphyseal eclasia or Maffucci's syndrome, there will be multiple swellings, similar swellings in the body in case of bone tumors. And family history is also important this because there are certain conditions like hereditary multiple exostosis where family history is important. Even in case of osteosarcoma, they are associated with some sorts of syndromes like Life-Romany syndrome, etc. So family history is also important. And coming to the examination. In examination, site of the swelling is very important. As we know, in a bone we have epiphysis, metaphysis and diaphysis, and there is a picture which I showed you here. So in this picture, this is the epiphyseal region where most commonly you find chondroblastoma and then giant cell tumor. Chondroblastoma is usually seen in earlier age group, less than 2 decades, in first 2 to 3 decades. Whereas giant cell tumor, it is predominantly seen in elderly age group. Coming to the sex of the patient also, mostly these bone tumors are predominantly seen in males, except giant cell tumor and fibrous dysplasia, which are seen in females, and enchondroma is another swelling which is equal in both males and females. So depending on the site of infection, some are epiphyseal like chondroblastoma and giant cell tumor. Most of the tumor they originate in the metaphyseal region like simple bone cyst, osteochondroma, aneurysmal bone cyst, osteosarcoma. All these things are metaphyseal in origin. In diaphyseal region you have Ewing sarcoma or fibrous dysplasia. All these things are seen in diaphyseal region. So these are pertaining to bone tumors. Swelling site of the different swellings, and then size you see. Then shape of the swelling is also important. In osteochondroma you have something like a stalk developing from the metaphyseal region and growing towards the epiphyseal region, and similar swellings also I have discussed in the history. And coming to the edge, usually benign bone tumors have a well defined edge because the rate of growth is slow. However, in malignant tumors, the edge is not well defined. In case of chronic inflammation also, the edge is not so well defined. Coming to the consistency of the tumors. Mostly they are bony hard, However, in malignant tumors, there is variegated consistency. That is, some parts of the tumor they are hard, some parts firm, and some parts soft. So this variable consistency is characteristic of usually malignant tumors. And coming to the pulsatile swellings, can we see a pulsatile swelling in case of bone tumors? Bone is hard, and you hardly ever find the bone pulsating. So is it relevant? Can we ever see a pulsatile swelling in case of bone tumors? Yes, there are certain conditions like telangiectatic osteosarcoma where pulsatile swellings are seen. And coming to the surface of the bone tumors, usually benign bone tumors are soft or lobulated, whereas malignant tumors they are irregular. Apart from this, there is one more component which you should see, which is called bone irregularity. That is irregularity of the surrounding bone. This is important in case of chronic osteomyelitis. There will be irregularity of the surrounding bone. So these are all the different things which you emphasize on in examination, local examination. Apart from that, you have to look for lymph node examination, and muscle wasting you see in measurements in case of chronic conditions like tuberculosis. Though we are discussing about bone tumors right now, I am clubbing a few points from chronic osteomyelitis also, because examination uh, will be similar for both these things. And neurovascular deficit should be examined in each and every case, because sometimes when the tumor is aggressive or grows in size, it may impinge upon the surrounding neurovascular structures, leading to their deficits. So that must be emphasized during examination. So these are all different things which you are going to see. And one more thing, tenderness, most of the benign tumors are not tender. And on inspection also, in certain tumors like osteosarcoma, you have tense shiny skin with engorged veins over that. So these are the things which you have to keep in mind during examination and history taking of the patient. So coming to the laboratory tests, complete blood picture is one of the tests you do, and ESR is also important. And coming to the serum protein electrophoresis in multiple myeloma, you have this serum M-band formation. So electrophoresis is also important if you suspect multiple myeloma. And then in case of secondaries in bones, prostatic specific antigen is also seen to know the origin of the primary. Serum calcium levels are elevated in case of metastatic bone disease or multiple myeloma. And alkaline phosphatase is elevated in case of certain tumors like osteosarcoma. LDH is elevated in certain tumors like Ewing's sarcoma. So these are all different laboratory tests. And coming to urine tests also, Burns-Jones proteins can be done to rule out multiple myeloma. So whenever you have a case of bone tumors, uh, X-ray is one of the modalities which is important. If they ask in Viva, if you are asked about blood tests, these are certain things which you have to mention and correlate. So then the main investigation, our orthopedic tool of diagnosing a bone tumor, it is plain X-ray. In plain X-ray, there are few things which you have to evaluate. One thing is anatomic site. We have already seen while examining whether the tumor or swelling is metafacial or epiphyseal or diaphyseal in location. That is one thing, anatomic site, which we have to see. Then the second thing is borders of the tumor. Following the borders of the tumor, you should see the bone destruction, surrounding bone destruction, and new matrix formation and periosteal reaction. So these are all the parameters which we have to evaluate. So coming to the borders. Suppose you have a bone here. This is the bone tumor. In case of benign bone tumor, gradually these tumor cells they increase in size and they invade the surrounding bone. So the line of demarcation, the border is well demarcated. You can make out the border between the deceased bone and the healthy bone. You can make out the area. So here the border, it is clearly demarcated. Well demarcated borders are seen in case of benign bone tumors. And the zone of transition, that is the gap between the diseased bone and the healthy bone, the zone of transition is also very narrow between the healthy and diseased bone in case of benign bone tumors. Coming to the aggressive bone tumors, as the aggressiveness of the bone tumors increase, say this is the bone. So as the aggressiveness of the bone increases, this zone, the borders are not well marginated or not clear or not well demarcated as in case of benign bone tumors. I think I'm trying to show it with the cursor here. I think you can all appreciate it. Here there will be a well demarcated border, and the borders are not so well demarcated as the aggressiveness of the tumors increase. And the zone of transition between the diseased part, diseased part and the healthy part of the bone, zone of transition is not narrow, it is wide, because there will be excessive destruction in these areas. Some areas there will be excessive destruction, and the reparative mechanisms of bone are lesser than that of the aggressiveness of the tumor. So the zone of transition is wide here. So these are the things which you have to understand about the borders of the tumors. Then you have bone destruction. There are three patterns of bone destruction. One is geographic pattern of bone destruction, second one is moth-eaten pattern, and fourth one is ill-defined or permeative pattern. So this is the bone. In geographic lesions, the destruction is localized to certain part of the bone. The rest of the bone is normal. So this well localized tumor destruction pattern is called the geographic destruction. Suppose moth eaten, suppose there is a cloth which is eaten by moth, there will be numerous holes here. Numerous small holes will be seen. So this is another pattern of destruction with this, which is moth eaten pattern of destruction. And then you have ill-defined or permeative patterns of destruction, that there will be destruction all along the bone like this. Usually it goes along the longitudinal axis of the bone. So as the invasiveness of the tumor increases, aggressiveness of the tumor increases, it ranges from geographic to moth-eaten to ill-defined or permeative patterns of destruction. So these are the patterns of bone destruction. Then, so these are few things which we have to see while evaluating bone tumors. And next thing is we have the periosteal reaction. Periosteal reaction we have already seen in case of osteomyelitis, chronic osteomyelitis. So presence of periosteal reaction is not pathognomonic of malignant tumors. It may be present in other tumors also. When there is an overlying periosteum like this, and there is some tumor here. As the tumor grows, this periosteum gets elevated and there will be some reactive newborn formation. This is what is the concept of periosteal reaction. Now in detail it will be dealt when you are being taught the malignant bone tumors. So these are all some of the features which we are going to see in case of bone tumors. So as I explained earlier, borders. Benign lesions, they have a well-defined border and narrow area of transition, and it is often associated with area of reactive sclerosis. And then aggressive tumors, they have faint borders, and the margins are not very clearly demarcated, and they have a wide zone of transition. This signifies that the tumor is a relatively fast growing lesion, whereas poorly delineated or almost absent margins, they indicate a aggressive or malignant lesion. So based on border, you can make out if the tumor is an aggressive tumor or a not so active tumor. So zones of transition also I have told you. So pattern of bone destruction, it is geographic, moth-eaten or permeative. And coming to the periosteal reaction, slow growing lesions, they have amorphous or closely laminated sheets of bone forming. Whereas in fast growing lesions, there will be widely laminated between the sheets of bone formation, there will be increased gap in case of fast growing lesions, or a sunburst pattern of periosteal reaction where new bone formation is seen along the vessels of the periosteum. This is seen in usually osteosarcoma. This one we will deal when we are going to deal with malignant bone tumors. And then other investigations like CT, PET scan, bone scan, MRI. So these are a few things which we are going to have some light upon. First thing is, on CT scan, you can understand the three-dimensional pattern of the tumor. Involvement of joint and other structures can be seen in case of CT. In case of MRI, you can evaluate the involvement of the marrow, and surrounding soft tissue involvement, and if there are any other involvement of adjacent compartments, these can be seen in case of MRI. And coming to the bone scan or PET scan, there will be increased uptake of the dye injected in areas of increased tumor activity. With that, you can not only identify the original lesion, you can also identify if there are any metastasis or skip lesions, or in case if any satellite lesions. All these things, they can be seen. Skip lesions, metastasis, they can be made out by using PET scan or PET scan and bone scan. And even before the appearance of radiological appearance in bone scan, we can identify the lesion. So these are the advantages of bone scan or PET scan. One thing is early identification, and second thing is you can identify the skip lesions. That is another type of lesion in the same bone at a different location. Suppose you take a femur and you have a tumor in the distal femur, you get an X-ray done. You may not be able to appreciate the skip lesion which is much more proximal, the proximal part of the femur, that you can make out. So these are the advantages of bone scan or PET scan. And then coming to the definitive diagnosis, that is the histopathological examination, biopsy. So before biopsy, all these imaging modalities are mandatory. With thorough localization of the tumor, you can go for biopsy. It is used for definitive diagnosis of the tumor. And different modalities are FNAC, core needle biopsy, or open biopsy. Open biopsy is invasive and it involves different procedures, like it involves as anesthetic risk, there will be blood loss, and when you open the tumor there may be some skin loss and other things. And if you do it in the first procedure itself, when you do the definitive procedure, there may be problems with respect to the soft tissue cover. So these are the advantages of disadvantages of the open procedure. Whereas advantages, you can take ample amount of sample and get it characterized histopathologically. FNAC advantages are, it is non-invasive or less invasive procedure. You can do it multiple number of times. However, there are chances of missing the actual sample, and usually the biopsy if performed should be done from the periphery of the tumor, not from the central area. So these are the some of the advantages and disadvantages of different procedures. And if a tumor is suspected to be malignant, one must refer the case to an oncologist for his opinion. And remember, management of bone tumors, especially malignant bone tumors, is a multidisciplinary approach. One orthopedician alone cannot sit and manage it. So you need an oncologist for the medical therapy before, and then orthopedician for the curettage of the tumor or stabilize the bone if necessary, if there is uh, structural weakening of the bone, and there could be the necessity of a plastic surgeon to fill the defects, any skin defects formed. So, and radiology, radiotherapy, all these things are involved. So any oncological case, that too an orthopedic oncology case, should be approached in a multidisciplinary way. And now, coming to the principles of biopsy, this I'm telling you out of interest. Though there is no direct question in your exams, it may be asked in your entrance examinations. First thing is, complete aseptic precautions should be taken while performing the biopsy. And whenever you are taking a bone tumor sample, surrounding soft tissues should also be sampled. And regarding the usage of tourniquet, usually in case when we apply, you use a tourniquet in case of orthopedic surgery primarily to have a bloodless field while doing the surgery, and then to minimize the loss of blood. So when we are applying a tourniquet, usually we elevate the limb, hold it for some time, or exsanguinate the limb, and then inflate the tourniquet. In case of bone tumors, examination should not be done because there is risk of proximal migration of the bone tumor cells. But to have a bloodless field, when you are using a tourniquet, after thorough tourniquet should be deflated first, and then meticulous hemostasis should be secured, and then only the wound should be closed. Otherwise, there is risk of hematoma formation, risk of infection, or persistence of the tumor cells in that area. So to prevent this, these are the precautions which we have to take while using tourniquet. First thing, the limb should not be exsanguinated, and second thing, the hemostasis should be secured. Only should be secured before closing the wound, and before that only the tourniquet should be deflated before closure. So coming to the defects in bone, I will come again. So while you are incising, so this is the limb, and this is the area of tumor. Here usually the incision should be longitudinal like this, because in case of biopsy, because in definitive procedure usually this entire tract should be removed to avoid the contamination of the incision tract with tumor cells. Suppose you have a horizontal incision like this, what happens? More area should be excised or removed, which will lead to further closure defects and other problems it will lead to, it may cause. So the incision should be vertical, longitudinally, not transverse. That is one point. So whenever you are keeping a drain, usually drain is kept for the to prevent hematoma formation. Whenever a drain is kept, it should be kept in line with the incision here like this. It should not be kept elsewhere like this. Same reason. There will be increased contamination. So this is one thing which you have to remember while performing the biopsy. And second thing, when you are approaching a tumor, less number of compartments should be contaminated. Direct exposure, directly you have to go to the bone tumor, not through some other compartment or involving more number of muscle planes to avoid the risk of contamination. And even major neurovascular structures should also be avoided. Drain should be placed along the incision site. So these are the things. And coming to the wound defect. Suppose you have a bone, you have curated the bone, and the defect which is formed should be circular. If it is not formed in circular, there will be excessive stresses in the surrounding regions and may lead to pathological fractures. So usually circular lesions are preferred. Circular defects should be created round, and they should be filled with bone cement for providing the structural support to the bone. So these are some of the principles, and crucial principle is preferably the surgeon who will do the final procedure or definitive surgery should preferably do the biopsy, and whenever they do, they should follow these principles of biopsy. So now we are going to discuss about, so now we have discussed so far about the examination and management protocols, and coming to the treatment, usually in case of benign bone tumors we have intralesional curettage and excision of the bone tumors. Usually, the different modalities are intralesional excision, where the different tumor cells in the site of lesion are removed, or sometimes marginal, or the compartment is removed, or marginal, that area of the bone which is involved is removed, and sometimes radical, the entire compartment is removed. So these are different excisions which are done. Usually, they are done in malignant tumors. However, confining ourselves to the benign bone tumors, only the area, the selected area is curated, and sometimes the surrounding soft tissue cuff is taken. And then after curating these tumors, because the recurrence rate is high, sometimes agents like liquid nitrogen, phenol are added to kill the residual tumor cells. So these are the methods of treatment in case of benign bone tumors. Malignant bone tumors, now the treatment modalities have evolved. There are many methods like limb salvage procedures, megaprosthesis, all these things are involved, this which you will be dealt in uh, malignant tumors. Now we are going to concentrate on benign bone tumors. So the first benign bone tumor is osteoid osteoma, which is most common in second to third decades of life, and you may mostly seen in males. It usually occurs in diaphyseal and metaphyseal region. Proximal femur is the most commonly involved site, followed by tibia and posterior elements of spine. One pathognomonic feature of osteoid osteoma is dull pain, which is worse at night, and it is relieved with use of NSAIDs. Usually it is self-limiting. After a certain period of time, this osteoid osteoma resolves. However, the pain will be more during night, which makes it inconvenient. So, usual NSAIDs are used to relieve the pain, and the tumor is curated. As soon as the tumor is curated, the pain will decrease in case of osteoid osteoma. Coming to the radiology findings, you have a central radiolucent nidus. See this. I am showing with the cursor. This is the central radiolucent nidus surrounded by dense zone of sclerosis in the cortex of the bone. So this is the radiological feature of osteoid osteoma. Same is the radiological features of Brody's abscess also, and osteoblastoma. However, in osteoblastoma, the size of the tumor is more. It is less than 2 centimeters. In osteoid osteoma, it is more than 2 centimeters. And this rim of sclerosis is generally thin. The surrounding rim of sclerosis is generally thin in case of osteoblastoma. And one important entrance bit is the bone scan. It shows double density sign or headlight in fog sign. That is, one area will take, see, first there will be increased uptake, and surrounded by there is another zone of increased uptake. So this is called double density sign or headlight in fog sign, which are seen in technetium 99 bone scans in case of osteoid osteoma. And coming to the pathology, osteoid osteoma is a very vascular tumor, so it is usually pink in color. And the nidus, as you see here, is red in color. And this nidus is usually enucleated very easily from the skeletal bed. Coming to the texture, in early stages, it is soft and granular because of the vascularity. However, as the tumor matures, it becomes dense and gritty due to calcification. Now, this is the histological appearance. See, this is the vascularity, and this is the osteoid which is formed. Immature oven bone which is formed, and it is rimmed by osteoblasts. So this nidus is found to be rich in prostaglandins and prostacyclins, which could be the main reason for the pain. So this is the histological appearance of osteoblastoma. Conservative methods is use NSAIDs, and then after some time the pain will resolve, the tumor will resolve. Other now recently CT guided or CM guided percutaneous radiofrequency ablation. That is, you keep a radiofrequency probe inside in the region with the help of imaging modalities, and with the temperature production, the tumor cells are lysed. And in surgical management, either you remove complete tumor en bloc or burn down the deceased bone. So these are the modalities of treatment in case of osteoid osteoma. In case of osteoblastoma, it is also a solitary benign bone tumor which produces osteoid. However, it is most commonly seen in spine. And as I told earlier, the surrounding reactive zone of sclerosis is less compared to that of osteoid osteoma, and the size of the lesion is more. So this is also very vascular tumor, and it is red in color. Then the cortical bone is thinned and often expanded. Here you can see the cortical bone is thinned and expanded. The tumor may also be surrounded by pseudocapsule. Same is the treatment, curettage and bone grafting to augment the bone. So this is the treatment modality of osteoid osteoma and osteoblastoma. So few differences. Osteoid osteoma, the incidence is more compared to that of osteoblastoma. Common site for osteoid osteoma is proximal femur, and vertebral column is most commonly affected in case of osteoblastoma. That too, posterior elements are most commonly involved. And clinical presentation also, the pain is main feature and which is nocturnal. Whereas pain is not that consistent in case of osteoblastoma. Radiologically also, the size is less than 2 centimeters osteoid osteoma, and it is more than 2 centimeters in case of osteoblastoma. And there will be more soft tissue mass in case of osteoblastoma. In coming to the histology, the trabeculae which are formed in osteoid osteoma are more regular and continuous, whereas it is disorganized in case of osteoblastoma. The stromal reaction is also more in osteoblastoma. And one more important thing is the malignant transformation of osteoid osteoma to osteosarcoma is rare, whereas osteoblastoma has chances of malignant transformation to osteosarcoma. So these are all the different features of osteoid osteoma and osteoblastoma. Coming to the osteochondroma. Osteochondroma is one more tumor. So assume it to be long bone. So this is the epiphysis, physis, and metaphyseal region. Usually there will be during the development of bone, there will be some herniation of the physeal cells like this through the perichondrium, and then gradually this tumor develops like this, osteochondroma. So it develops from the, so as you see in the X-ray, it develops from this herniated cells of physis. They grow here, and along with that, this cortex will also grow, and this medulla will also grow inside. This I will depict more clearly in the slides to come. So main thing is the herniation of some of the fascial cells is thought to be the reason behind the origin of osteochondroma. This is one of the hypotheses explaining the origin of osteochondroma. An osteochondroma is a benign cartilaginous derived neoplasm where an aberrant subperiosteal nest of fascial cartilage which grows and matures according to normal enchondral ossification. So usually because it arises from the fascial region, as long as the skeletal growth progresses, the size of this tumor also increases. Once the skeletal maturity is attained, this tumor stops growing. So this is one of the important feature of osteochondroma. It is most commonly seen in second decade of life. Males are most commonly affected, usually seen in long bones. So here you can see there is some fascial cartilage here, and this fascial cartilage got herniated out of the perichondrium, and then this one started growing here. This blue one is the cartilaginous cap which is derived from the physis, and then the stalk is continuous with the stalk of the tumor is continuous with the cortex, and then the medulla of the bone will also is also growing into this stalk. So this is the osteochondroma. This is the cartilaginous cap which is overlying here, and this is the cortex which is continuous with the cortex of the parent bone, and this is the medulla. Usually this thickness of the cartilaginous cap should be less than 2 centimeters. So they are asymptomatic unless they impinge upon surrounding neurovascular structures. They are asymptomatic, and they are only identified when there is some painless lump or when there is some trauma and they get it's an incidental radiographic finding. And other things, if there is any growth disturbance of the extremity, or if there is some mechanical obstruction to the joint movement, or if there is any secondary impingement of the soft tissues like surrounding tendons, nerves and vessels, then the attention is drawn. Sometimes there could be some pathological fractures of the this osteochondroma mass. Even then there will be pain. So with that there will be some attention towards the osteochondroma, otherwise it is usually asymptomatic. They can be either pedunculated or sessile. So you can see a sessile one here. This is a broad based one. And pedunculated one I have shown it pictorially there. And I already explained that the cortex and cancellous bones of the osteochondroma they blend with that of the host. Usually they are metaphyseal in origin. See, this one is a pedunculated one. This is usually metaphyseal in origin and it goes away from the joint. It grows away from the joint. Enchondromas are either pedunculated or sessile, usually metaphyseal in location, and they grow towards the diaphysis or away from the joint. So here you can see. This is the osteochondroma, pedunculated osteochondroma. You want to see. This is the MRI picture. And ultrasound. What is the use of ultrasound in case of osteochondroma? As you all know, the cartilage it cannot be appreciated on a plain radiograph. On clinical examination, you find the tumor or the swelling to be more compared to what you see on the X-ray. Why is this increase in size? And even intraoperatively also, the tumor seems to be larger than what you have appreciated on the X-ray. The reason is you cannot appreciate cartilaginous cap on X-ray, whereas it can be appreciated in case of ultrasound or MRI scan. So using these modalities, we can know the thickness of the cartilaginous cap. Suppose if it is growing steadily with skeletal maturity, it's okay. Or if it is confined to the less than 2 centimeters also, we can leave it. Suppose the rate of growth of cartilaginous cap is increasing, or if it is more than 2 centimeters, then there is risk of malignant transformation. One should be watchful about it. So even if the growth of the cap continues after skeletal maturity also, you should be watchful about malignant transformation. So that is the use why we are doing ultrasound, to have a serial checkup over the thickness of the cartilaginous cap. So these are the gross images. Here you can see that this is the, I am showing with the cursor, this is the cartilaginous cap here, and this is the cortical rim of the bone, and this is the cancellous bone here. So same is the case here. This is the cartilaginous end, this is the cortical bone, and you can see this is the cartilaginous area of the tumor. So these are the different images of osteochondroma. And this is the microscopical feature. Usually it resembles the normal facial area. However, the cartilage here, it is more disorganized than normal. And coming to the treatment, in case of large lesions, when we suspect some malignant transformation, or if there are some local pressure effects, the lesion should be excised with a cuff of normal tissue around. And in asymptomatic lesions, it can be left. So these are the treatment modalities of osteochondroma. And coming to the enchondroma, it is a solitary benign tumor which is intramedullary, and it is made of mature cartilage. Mature cartilage, it is most commonly seen in short tubular bones of hands and feet. Here a small point, enchondroma is the most common tumors of the hand, and it is mostly seen in the hands and feet. Suppose if more proximal locations, you can suspect malignant transformation. You have to expect malignant transformation. Usually in hands and feet they are benign. And then enchondroma, it is usually seen in proximity to the fascial plate, and they are seen in proximal part of the phalanges or in distal part of the metacarpal. Sometimes they occupy the entire diaphysis. So as I told earlier, they arise from it is a hematoma. It arises from the island of fertile cartilage, which is detached from the growth cartilage, and it is equal in incidence in both males and females. Usually it may also come to the notice of the doctor or patient, usually in second decade or third decade also sometimes. And chondroma, because it is a slow growing tumor. And after the skeletal maturity, usually the growth of the tumor stops. In adults, you can find some calcification or pathognomonic of the enchondromas. And coming to the gross appearance, it has gritty cartilaginous appearance, glistening white or blue appearance. Sometimes when there is some myxoid transformation in this, like this, it is suggestive of malignant transformation. Even microscopy also, you have the cartilaginous matrix containing nests of chondrocytes within it, and cells do not show atypia. Usually they present as swelling in the hand, or there could be some pathological fracture or incidental radiological fracture. And if the tumor becomes painful without pathological fracture, malignancy can be suspected. It occurs equally in both sexes. So here you can see it. The periosteal reaction is absent, sclerosis is absent, it is closer to the physis, and it appears as well circumscribed, distinct area, and it expands, and sometimes it expands and deforms the bone. Sometimes small areas of calcification may appear, which is pathognomonic of enchondroma. So same thing we have discussed earlier, when there are certain syndromes like Ollier's disease and Maffusi's syndrome. Both of these things are important in entrance point of view. Maffusi's syndrome is nothing but multiple enchondromatosis with hemangiomas, and Ollier's disease is multiple enchondromatosis. These have increased risk of malignant transformation up to 30%. And more proximal lesions also, the malignancy rates are high. So here you can see that there is a malignant fracture, sorry, pathological fracture, and this is the malignant transformation into chondrosarcoma. See, the cortex has very thinned out, And this is a very expansive tumor also can be seen here. Multiple lesions are also seen. So these are the complications of enchondroma. Treatment in asymptomatic individuals, it can be left alone. If the lesion is asymptomatic, then curettage and bone grafting is done. If a pathological fracture has occurred, we should wait till the fracture heals, and then curettage and bone grafting should be done. So as I told earlier, multiple chondromatosis, where in Olliers disease it is non-heritable condition, and in Maffucci's syndrome it is associated with hemangiomas. Usually one side of the body is involved. If both sides it is involved, there is increased chance of malignancy. So this is Olliers disease, where multiple enchondromatosis are seen. So these are all the X-rays of Olliers disease, where multiple enchondromas, and see the deformity, there will be bowing of deformity, shortening of the limbs. All these things are also seen. Now which is beyond the scope of discussion at your stage. So coming to the chondroblastoma, it is also known as Codman's tumor. It is a primary benign tumor which arises from the immature cells of the epiphyseal cartilage. Immature cells, that is enchondroma is from mature cells and chondroblastoma is from the immature cells of the epiphyseal cartilage. Chondroblastoma is one tumor which is mostly epiphyseal in location, and is seen in immature skeleton, mostly seen in first and second decades. Upper end of the humerus and tibia are the most common sites of location. Usually asymptomatic, sometimes because it is periarticular, some synovitis may be seen. Pathological fractures are extremely rare in case of chondroblastoma. Here you can see that the tumor is a well-defined sorry. It is a well-defined tumor with good well-defined margins, and it is a lytic lesion. Sometimes there will be scalloping of the tumor present. Fine calcifications may also be present. However, usually it does not breach the physis, and periosteal reaction is also not seen. But if they are seen, it signifies aggressive nature of the tumor. So in chondroblastoma, you have a polygonal chondroblast, and there will be less stroma in chondroblastoma, and within this stromal matrix there will be calcification along this polygonal chondroblast. The appearance of this calcification, pericellular calcification, it is called chicken wire appearance. This chicken wire appearance is one of the important PG entrance bits, and between these chondroblasts there will be some giant cells also appearing. So this is the my picture of chondroblastoma. See, there are occasional giant cells, and there will be some pericellular calcification. In this slide, chicken wire calcification is not very clear, but it is one of the pathognomonic features of chondroblastoma, which is asked in entrance exams. Same, if symptomatic, it can be left. Otherwise, curettage should be done, and then some tumoricidal cells should be lysed by using liquid nitrogen or phenol to prevent recurrence. Sometimes en bloc excision should be done if it does not, disturb the physis or joint involvement. We should take care that there is less involvement of the joint. And coming to the next benign bone tumor, which is the chondromyxoid fibroma. It is also a benign cartilaginous tumor. However, it has myxoid and fibrous elements also in the tumor. And it accounts for less than 1% of the tumors. It is more common in males, same, and it is usually seen in metaphysis and expands towards the diaphysis, usually involves the proximal tibia. And usually it is incidental radiological findings. Sometimes chronic pain of mild nature is seen. So coming to the radiological feature, it is usually an eccentric lytic lesion, which sometimes in the occasional conditions there will be expansion of the surrounding cortex, and bite-like lesions are seen. See, it is appearing as two hemispheres. So this sort of appearance as two hemispheres is called bite-like lesion. A lesion progress, it becomes lobulated with hemispheric bite-like cortical destruction. See. So these are the bite lesions. This is the CT picture where you can see a bite lesion, and usually it is eccentric and metaphyseal to diaphyseal in location, lytic lesion with bite-like lesions or scalloped edges of the cortex. So these are the findings which you see in chondromyxoid fibroma. Usually for these bone tumors there is no one definitive diagnosis. Usually differential diagnosis is kept as discussed in the very first slide. Treatment is extended curettage or resection. Bone grafting may be necessary if the defect is large. So if the lesion is located closer to the physis, then we have to give time till the tumor has grown away from the physeal area. And coming to the one of the most important bone tumors, that is giant cell tumor. It was first described by Sir Ashley Cooper, and it is seen in skeletally mature individuals, usually in third decade of life, more common in seen in females, and it is eccentric tumor seen in epiphyseal-metaphyseal region. And one important feature is it grows up to the articular cartilage, and the articular cartilage remains intact. And another important feature is the overlying cortex is thinned out. The cortex of the bone is thinned out, and the contour of the bone is expanded by this bony tumor. Tumor is usually gray to reddish brown in color, and it is very soft and friable. Sometimes while discussing the clinical features, you have something called eggshell crackling. That is, if the cortex is very thinned out, while palpating itself, it may break, giving the feeling of the eggshell breaking of the eggshell, which is called eggshell crackling. This happens only if the cortex is thinned out. If the cortex is not thinned out, you will not appreciate the eggshell crackling. So in exam, if you suspect it to be GCT, don't tell eggshell crackling unless you appreciate it on physical examination, because not all GCTs have that thinning of the cortex. So coming to the histological feature, see, these are the multiple multinucleated giant cells, and there will be stromal cells. This is the stromal cells which multiply, which are aggressive, and some small foci of ossification and osteoid production is also seen. So see this, eccentric in location, and usually epiphyseal and metaphyseal areas, epiphyseal-metaphyseal in location. It is extending up to the articular cartilage, and there will be thinning of the cortex. So based on the radiological features, it is divided into three grades, Campanaki grading, based on the continuity of the cortex, thinning of the cortex, and extension into the surrounding soft tissues. As the aggressiveness of the tumor increases, there will be breach in the cortex, surrounding soft tissue involvement will be there, and pathological fractures may also be present in case of giant cell tumor. So, a lytic lesion, once again, most common sites are distal femur and radius, distal radius. So, this is the lytic lesion which is centered over the epiphysis, and it is involving the metaphysis also, and it extends up to the subchondral bone. Subchondral bone. And there are fine trabeculations or septations within this, giving rise to a soap bubble appearance. So now in upcoming slides we are going to see about aneurysmal bone cyst. Aneurysmal bone cyst and GCT both have similar features, but aneurysmal bone cyst is most commonly seen in skeletally immature individuals, whereas GCT is seen in skeletally mature individuals. Underline it, because if you are shown as X-ray, then you have to comment on skeletal maturity. And if it has a bone tumor, then if it has similar appearance, if it is a skeletally mature one, it is safe to give a diagnosis of GCT. If it is a skeletally immature one with similar radiological appearance, it is safe to give the diagnosis as aneurysmal bone cyst. Please remember this. And coming to the GCT, curettage is bone grafting is one of the modalities. However, with that, the recurrence rate of GCT is as high as 60%. So, liquid agents like liquid nitrogen, phenol are used to lyse the tumor cells. And other method is, see this, in the second X-ray you can see some whitish material kept inside. This is bone cement. When we keep the bone cement inside, it will be an exothermic reaction. And with this exothermic reaction, the tumor cells are lysed. So the recurrence rates are minimized. Even if there is any rate of, if chance of recurrence are there, it can be easily identified in case of bone cement. This is called sandwich technique, using bone cement for treatment of this one GCT. It is called sandwich technique because when in case of there is subchondral extension, usually a gel form is kept between the layer of this bone cement and the subchondral cartilage to prevent the damage to the cartilage, because it causes exothermic reaction. No? So to prevent the damage to the subchondral bone, gel form, and over that some bone cartilaginous bony pieces are kept. So this is called sandwich technique. And coming to the cystic lesions of bone, we have three. We are going to deal about four lesions now: unicameral bone cyst, aneurysmal bone cyst, fibrous dysplasia, and adamantinoma. Coming to the unicameral bone cyst, it usually occurs in the first and second decades of life, and more predominant in males. And then most common sites are proximal humerus followed by proximal femur. There are two types of cyst. One is active cyst and latent cyst. Usually active cysts are closer to the physis, and as they grow, as they mature, they move away from the physis as the growth occurs. So these are the latent cysts. They are located away from the physis. So the location of the tumor as serial radiographs are done may shift from the metaphyseal region to towards the diaphysis in case of unicameral bone cyst. Usually it is self-limiting. After certain age, it is self-limited and the bone gets formed there. This unicameral bone cyst, it is metaphyseal region of immature skeleton and it has a fluid-filled cavities. The contents of the fluid are different. Prostacyclins and prostaglandins are present. They cause the lysis of the bone and they expand and weaken the cortical bones surrounding the tumor. Usually it is filled with thin yellowish fluid, whereas in aneurysmal bone cyst you have a blood-filled cavity. Whereas here mostly you will have yellowish serous fluid, and the cyst wall, it is lined by fibrovascular tissue and giant cells. Usually they present with the pathological features. So here, so this is the unicameral bone cyst. Proximal humerus is the most common site, and a part of the fractured bone has fallen inside into the cavity. This is called fallen fragment sign. It is a very important PG bit, and even in Viva also you may be asked it. See, the cortex has thinned and expanded. A lytic lesion, usually central in locations, found in the immature skeleton with a pathological fracture, and this fracture fragment seen inside the cavity, which is called the fallen fragment sign, is the radiological pathognomonic feature of the unicameral bone cyst. These can be left, otherwise the lesion can be aspirated and some steroid like methylprednisolone can be injected inside. Otherwise, if the symptoms persist, it is curated, and then some bone matrix or bone cement is also kept to stabilize the bone. If this tumor involves proximal femur, then you may have to go for prophylactic fixation because it is the weight bearing bone. Coming to the aneurysmal bone cyst, see, the radiological feature are very much similar to that of giant cell tumor. See the trabeculations, the thinning of the cortex, expansile lesion, usually in the epiphyseal and metaphyseal region, but this is an immature skeleton. So this is one point which you have to keep in mind when you are dealing with such X-rays. It is a solitary lesion seen in metaphyseal lesion, and there may be one hypothesis for the formation of this tumor is arteriovenous malformation. This is only a hypothesis. Following some trauma, there is some arteriovenous malformation in that region which has led to the formation of aneurysmal bone cyst. Same like you have some herniation of the facial cartilage, formation of osteochondroma, a hypothesis has been made for the origin of aneurysmal bone cyst. So pain and swelling are the main features, and pathological fractures are seen. Most commonly it is also seen in pedicles and laminae of the vertebrae. So see this, a lytic radiolucent lesion which is ballooned out and in metaphyseal region, and this is the thin shell of cortical bone. Easily one can be deceived into telling it as a giant cell tumor. It is a differential diagnosis, but in a skeletally immature individual it is always safe to opine it as aneurysmal bone cyst. And coming to the pathology, grossly it appears as a honeycomb of blood-filled cavities, and there will be a fibrocystic tissue surrounding it. And in that there will be altered blood pigments because they're long standing, the blood will be there. There will be hemosiderin and other pigments. Xanthoid cells are also seen. Treatment is surgical curettage and stabilizing the bone with bone grafting, and if necessary some fixation should be done. Fixation, remember, always remember, fixation in case of a bone tumor will not alter the pathological process. It will only give support to the bone. And one more important thing is fibrous dysplasia. It is an intrinsic defect of enchondral bone maturation. This results in immature or incomplete ossification pattern. So it is characterized by some fibrous stroma component along with some bony islands of metaplastic bone. All these things, they cause structural weakening of the bone and pathological fractures. Usually single bone is involved, which is called monoosteotic fibrous dysplasia. Sometimes when multiple bones are involved, it is called polyosteotic fibrous dysplasia. And in some syndromes like McCune-Albright syndrome, there will be polyosteotic fibrous dysplasia along with endocrinopathies like precocious puberty and Coffelet spots. All these things are seen. This is one of the important entrance bits. This point can be asked. Usually they are asymptomatic. However, in 70% of cases they present with bone pain. In most of the cases, within by 10 years of age, skeletal deformities develop. However, see in this I'll show you. In Shepherd-Crook deformity, because this one has occurred in the proximal femur, the bone is weak, and because of subsequent forces over the femur, there will be development of deformity. This deformity is called Shepherd-Crook deformity, which is seen in fibrous dysplasia. And there are chances of secondary malignant transformation into sarcomas, mostly osteosarcoma. So in this, there are poorly oriented thin osseous trabeculae without prominent osteoblastic lining and fibrous stroma. This arrangement of osseous trabeculae is in a Chinese letter pattern. So in case of fibrous dysplasia, the key points are most common in females, and then multiple bones can be involved. McCune-Albright syndrome is another important point. Then this Chinese letter pattern. These are all some fancy questions which will be asked in entrance. Chinese letter pattern is C, and then the Shepherd-Crook deformity is another thing, and most important radiological feature is ground glass matrix. So these are few 6 points which you have to remember about fibrous dysplasia, because they may ask which of the following is not a feature of fibrous dysplasia, like that in your MCQs. So coming to the radiological features, it is usually metaphyseal or diaphyseal in location, centric or eccentric. Usually it is well defined with geographic type of destruction, and there will be prominent ground glass matrix. So this is the radiological feature. Lytic lesion usually centric or centric here. And as days progress with increased weight bearing, there will be this shepherd crook deformity in case of adults. So, treatment asymptomatic can be left conservatively. However, if there is progressive deformity, or if there is any pathological fracture, or if there is non-union or persistent pain, surgical management is done. It is curettage can be done and fixation can be given, and preferably a cortical graft like fibular graft should be used, because the resorption by the disease process will be less in case of a cortical graft than that of a cancellous graft. And coming to the treatment point, bisphosphonates are also added. They have a role in treatment of fibrous dysplasia. So coming to one of the last topics, adamantinoma. Adamantinoma is usually seen in tibia, anterior cortex of tibia is involved. It is a well circumscribed monoosteotic lesion seen at an early age. Pain, anterior bowing of tibia, swelling, these are the most commonly seen. Even mandible is also involved in adamantinoma. See this. This is the radiolucent lytic lesion with confluent vacuolated or ground glass appearance. It is located in the metaphysis to diaphyseal region, and there will be cortical expansion. This is slightly aggressive type of tumor. Adamantinoma is an aggressive tumor, aggressive to malignant variety. So in this, observation is seen over a period of time, and bracing is needed in case of anterior bowing of tibia. And in case of progressive deformity or impending pathological feature, complete surgical excision with bone grafting and internal fixation is advised. So with this we have completed the benign bone tumors topic, and few important PG bits pertaining to the bone tumors are: most common bone tumors are secondaries, and most common primary malignant bone tumor is multiple myeloma. Primary malignant bone tumor is the origin of the tumor is in the bone itself. And second most common primary malignant bone tumor is osteosarcoma. First is multiple myeloma and second is osteosarcoma, primary malignant bone tumor. And commonest malignant bone tumor of a flat bone is chondrosarcoma. And coming to the commonest true benign tumor is osteoid osteoma. And most common benign tumor of spine is hemangioma. And any benign bone tumor, as I told earlier, will have a well-defined margin, narrow zone of transition, and it will for feeling it has a uniform consistency. Whereas malignant bone tumors, they have a ill-defined margin, that is the area between the diseased bone and healthy bone cannot be demarcated clearly, and there will be wide zone of transition. The destruction will also be either permeative pattern of destruction will be seen. These features you will appreciate when you are shown the x-rays of the malignant tumors. And on palpation there will be variable consistency. On inspection there will be engorged veins, and you have to see for any local infiltration of the soft tissues. So finally, we have this question. All of you please go through the question and type your answer in the chat box. So no responses here. So 12-year-old male patient, he complains of a painless bony heart swelling. Painless bony heart swelling arising from the left femoral metaphysis. The swelling has a well-defined margin and it has a uniform consistency, and it has a stalk of connection with the bone. So there is an answer 109. MRI. MRI is the answer. Can you substantiate your answer? Why do you think that MRI is the answer? And what is the tumor? MRI is the correct answer, but what is the tumor? What is the tumor and why is the MRI the main modality of treatment? I am waiting here. Somebody answer, please. Cartilaginous tumor. Okay, very good. Osteochondroma is the answer. Nice. Next. Then why do you want to go for MRI? Why not X-ray or CT? I mean, which structure you have to focus upon to see if it is undergoing malignant transformation or not. What is that structure in that osteochondroma? No, not for medulla. Which part of that osteochondroma you are going to see, which cannot be seen on X-ray? Of course, MRI is useful because it can identify the medullary lesions, but not in this case. Maybe that medulla could be second or third in the list. The first one, yes, the cartilage cap. The cartilage cap, which you cannot appreciate on X-ray, can be appreciated on the MRI. So that will be the answer. So I'm happy that you understood. Are there any doubts? If there are any doubts, either I can answer now or you can mail it to my email ID. So this is my email ID. You can send your queries to it. So one important thing is, while when you are shown an X-ray, especially that of benign bone tumors, you should tell first. I mean, you cannot comment. You cannot have one single diagnosis like you have in fractures and other metabolic disorders. You have differential diagnosis. Then always histopathological examination is the gold standard. But here you should take care that you will not utter blunders while telling the X-ray, because you are shown an X-ray of osteoid osteoma and you say that it is giant cell tumor like that. That is not appropriate. And when you are shown an X-ray of a mature skeleton and expansile lytic eccentric lesion in the epiphyseal metaphyseal location, mature skeleton, you say it is aneurysmal bone cyst, you will have trouble. It is safe to say GCT. In case of chondroblastoma, you usually have differential diagnosis. All cystic lesions have one differential diagnosis. You have to substantiate why you are telling that as your diagnosis. So that is the crux of benign bone lesions. Most X-ray, in X-ray point of view, you will be asked it, and PG questions also. Many questions come from it, and you will have short notes. And some questions like GCT can be asked as essay questions also. And next coming topics, malignant bone tumors. You will see osteosarcoma, Ewing sarcoma, and other things which are important essay questions to you. So thank you. So you have any doubts, you can send your queries to the mail or you can type in the chat box, which if possible I will answer now, otherwise in the next class they will be answered. I'll wait for 2 minutes for you to type. So I think we are done with the session. See you again. All of you, please go through it. Please read it once because it's a very important topic. And unless you read those things, you cannot appreciate the malignant bone tumors in the upcoming classes. Thank you.